In 2002, Bethesda Game Studios released The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind, a visionary role-playing game that redefined the genre and forever altered the standards of open-world gaming. Now, 20 years later, our team remains so enchanted by the island of Vvardenfell that we're working tirelessly to bring you Skywind, a total conversion mod that recreates the original game from scratch and expands it to align with current development standards, including full voice acting. To mark the 20th anniversary of The Elder Scrolls III, our team wished to share some of the places in the game they hold closest to their hearts, and why they remember them so keenly.
My favorite place in Morrowind is Seyda Neen. Vvardenfell can be a very alien world for people to enter, so Seyda Neen is specifically designed to be an introduction to Morrowind's world. When you first lay your eyes on Seyda Neen, it seems like a fairly unassuming village. But in the distance you see a strange creature on spindly legs, and you wonder, what is that? So you're intrigued, and you explore from there, and as you travel north, the lands only become more alien, so your intrigue only goes up. So Seyda Neen might not be the most exciting or flashy place in Morrowind, but all good things needs a solid foundation, and Seyda Neen is a very solid one. Seyda Neen will always be there to welcome me back whenever I feel like returning to Morrowind.
My favorite place in Morrowind is probably the Bitter Coast region. It's a region that covers most of the western shores of Vvardenfell, and it's appropriately named that because most of the region consists of this salty, dank swamp. Its shoreline is scattered with these little fishing shacks and poor ports that are just made of sticks. Seyda Neen is the most well established, and it's where every new character you make is greeted. Once you leave that town, though, you're lost in this murky swampland that really starts to show its true beauty the more you explore it. It sounds ironic to call a swamp beautiful, but I think it's true. My favorite thing in the Bitter Coast is when you encounter Tarheel. Well, to call it an encounter isn't right. It's more like you just witnessed Tarheel in his final few seconds. When I first played Morrowind and I encountered Tarheel, I didn't notice him at first. So I was just exploring this murky swamp, everything gets really quiet, and then suddenly there's just this man screaming from the sky above me. It was so loud, it made me jump. It scared me. Easily one of the most memorable moments in Morrowind.
I remember walking into Balmora the first time, and it just felt so foreign and almost hostile. Everyone looking at you, staring at you, being suspicious. And the architecture and still striders looked so weirdly otherworldly and uninviting. And I realized that, that this is truly an extraordinary game world and something new and unique, and I instantly fell in love.
Out of all of the striking locations on Vvardenfell, the Mages Guild of Balmora has always been the one I remember most keenly. To this very day, I still remember how awestruck I was when, after going down the short corridor, I entered the great underground hall. Even compared to the general beauty of Balmora, it felt magical. Shining, blue lights made this place feel oddly welcoming for me. A perfect place to study, a beautiful portrayal of what its function was all about. But visual beauty alone wouldn't make it so memorable for me. The people inhabiting it played a huge role as well. Ajira, the first member of Mages Guild to give me duties, Sharn Gramuzgob with her gruesome secrets, and Ranis Atris, unlikable steward of the guild, constantly plotting upstairs. All this combined has made for an experience I to this day treasure memories about, and like to relive it each time I decide to play Morrowind again.
I have to say that for me, one of the most memorable locations from my time playing through Morrowind is Arkngthand, the Dwemer ruin near Balmora. It's connected to the main quest, so obviously it took me longer than it should have to actually get around to exploring there when I first played, but when I did, This was already an alien experience for a fantasy game with these giant mushrooms and bizarre creatures, but still I wasn't sure what I was looking at when I came upon this ancient rusted metal bridge. After I made my way inside, I was absolutely floored. There's this interesting contrast in Dwemer ruins between ancient and dilapidated and technologically advanced, from crumbling stone in the entrance hall to still functional engines and pistons scattered throughout the facility, and an observatory that one can imagine could actually look beyond the stars. I already liked Morrowind by the time I decided to actually do the main quest, but the environmental storytelling and clever level design made me fall in love. I had to know what happened to these deep elves that mysteriously disappeared. Now, 20 years later, I'm still wondering.
The first thing that caught my attention about Suran was the beauty of its location. Morrowind is this really gruff and alien space, right? But Suran stands out as this sort of beautiful and lush resort town. It's right on the waters of Lake Mosobi and surrounded by the beautiful Ascadian Isles. I just think it's the perfect complement to Balmora. You know, it gives that complete picture of House Hlaalu. Balmora is this really urban center. It has a huge focus on trade and has plenty of corruption if you know where to look. But in Suran, you see kind of a different face. It's lavish, it's rich, it's rural, and with the House of Earthly Delights, I mean, it's even a little bit hedonistic. When all that pleasure starts to fade, though, the player starts to see a different, dark side to House Hlaalu. Suran is surrounded by these plantations of these Hlaalu nobles, and they're some of the biggest slaveholders in the game. That's what makes Morrowind so memorable. This is a game where no location is just one note. There's always something for the player to grapple with. For me, Suran is just the perfect example of that nuanced world building that keeps us all talking about this game 20 years later.
One thing that I remember very, very clearly from my early Morrowind days was stumbling onto the Quara vampire hideout. The hideout itself at first felt like any bandit cave, so it didn't stick out immediately. What stuck out was when I contracted vampirism, or the disease that leads to it, forgot to get that cured, and then went to bed one day and my character had a horrible dream that was described in vivid detail, and suddenly every character in the game was treating me differently. Suddenly I felt like an outlaw, a criminal. I remember I went back to the hideout where I remembered that I had contracted the disease, and immediately all the characters there start, calling me new blood or whatever it is they say. And I realized I had found sort of a second world to the game. Obviously, it's only a few quests, but it felt like a genuine underworld more than the Thieves Guild ever did.
There is one place I've been afraid of since I was a child. The Ghostgate. When I played the game for the first time, I didn't understand it. Literally, it was in English, which I didn't speak back then, so I just roamed the land and stole every plate and fork I could find. I had no respect for any place but this one. Even though I didn't understand the world or the lore, this place demanded respect from me. There are many scary areas in Morrowind and many gruesome monsters, but they aren't gated away. Whatever is behind this gate, it was dangerous enough to be locked up in this fashion. And I just understood. I shouldn't pass these iron gates or I'll be in trouble.
I remember when I was first exploring Morrowind. I was holed up in Balmora's Mages Guild when I stumbled upon the guild guide for the first time. When I asked her about travel services, she presented a list of 4 locations. I had already visited Aldrune, Vivec, and Caldera before, but I hadn't been to this mysterious place known as Sadrith Mora yet. So naturally, I decided to click on the button and see where I ended up. After exiting the Imperial Tower, I was absolutely stunned. There was this juxtaposition between the Imperial segment of the town, where I had come from, and the distinctly abnormal structure of the rest of the city. I just found myself exploring each nook and cranny of the city. The Bodega Market in the center of town, surrounded by these mystical mushroom towers that spiraled into the clouds. The Council House with its blue and red spherical growth, wrapped around with other fungi. I later discovered that these mushrooms were grown and lived in by an order of isolationist ancient wizards, and I was completely hooked into this world and all of its alien charm. Whenever I think of Morrowind's uniqueness, my mind always goes to that first time stepping out of the Imperial Towers and plunging headfirst into this spore-filled oasis.
So I'd have to say that my favorite location in Morrowind is Tel Mora. Because to me, the charm of Morrowind, and really the reason why we're still playing it 20 years later, is that it speaks to this innate sense of curiosity we all have. It's about going out and exploring this fascinating new world, and nothing captures that sense more than going and seeing the Telvanni Towers for the first time. I remember stumbling upon them because I'd gotten lost and started to wander around, which is pretty on par with the Morrowind experience. And it was just like, whoa, there's these giant mushroom towers. They just seemed so magical. It's like Tel Mora is a wizard lord's mushroom castle, and as a kid, that was the coolest thing ever. And Vvardenfell really felt like this living, breathing place. I mean, it had its own culture and history, and getting to discover more about that world was so exciting. Like, I remember walking around Tel Mora, or really any of the other Telvanni settlements, and just encountering these characters that were so hilariously egocentric and unique, and it really made you want to get to know them. Now with Skywind, we're getting to infuse a new life into this already rich world, and I know that we are so excited to share that with you.
If you're following the main quest in Morrowind, Urshilaku camp is possibly the first Ashlander camp you visit. After toughening you up a little, the Master of the Blades has just sent you off to some remote camp in the wilderness to talk to a clan leader. If you're anything like me, you probably entered at speed during an ash storm, pursued by a cliff racer. It's not big, just a few tents around a fire amidst dunes of black ash. But for me, it's one of the most characterful places in the game, and a perfect example of world building done simply but expertly. You've got the enclosing sanctuary of the awning over the actually pretty comfy yurts at the center, the moody turquoise light of a few bug lamps, the tinkling of wind chimes, a hollowed out shell of a silt strider, and of course the Ashlander people themselves, who look and dress differently to the rest of the Dunmer, and are really cagey and don't like you, but are actually cool when you get to know them. It does feel like the kind of place that heroes eager to prove themselves ought to go to, if you don't get lost and become cliff racer food first, of course.
The place that I've chosen to talk about is the Urshilaku burial caverns. It's like the quest you do when you're establishing yourself as a clan friend of the Ashlanders. And at this point, if you were considered an outlander by the settled Dunmer, you're considered like an extra outlander by the Ashlanders, and they're really wanting to test you, so they're going to send you in to retrieve a bow that has been buried with the grandfather or father of the chief. And the reason that I love this location so much is because it's really simple, and yet it has all these storytelling considerations woven into it that just elevate it above other dungeons, which it could so easily be exactly like. And it's just a completely ordinary door down into a cave, completely ordinary tile set, descending passage. But just before a skeleton comes to try and smash your face in, you see Dunmer mummies located in alcoves in the wall, and they've all got different grave goods that tells you what kind of person that person was. It's like you're an archaeology student. You know, some have scrolls because they were clearly scholars. Some of them are obviously warriors with spears and armor. And there's different styles of burial. So some mummies are left just in the side, so they might be of lower status, and then some are on their own pedestal of rock. And you never get any of this information. You're just left to kind of guess it and to use your imagination, which is what elevates this otherwise completely boring fetch quest. And yet, it just fits so well into where the story's at that moment. So they're sending you somewhere that's sacred to them, that's slightly dangerous, but not very dangerous, and that has a bearing on your wish to become more closely associated with the tribe.
If I had to pick one spot that truly stood out to me, I'd go with the Valley of the Incarnate. Like a lot of people, I did not do the main quest until basically everything else was done, and after 200 hours of gameplay, I thought I'd pretty much experienced all that Morrowind had to offer. I'd finished the guilds, traveled the map, when all of a sudden I get a quest to go find a new area. At the age of 10, I had absolutely no idea how there could even be a new area, but I followed the wise woman's directions, got lost a couple of times, and when I found it, there it was. It was right around the corner from a dozen other quests I'd already done. Somehow, a new area to explore. It's those quirks of the design that always keep me coming back to Morrowind. There aren't any secondary maps or levels, inaccessible areas. Everything's hidden in plain sight right from the start, but somehow, you only end up discovering things when the time is right. And, despite my 1,000 or more hours in the game, I always feel like I'm discovering something new when I come back to give the game another shot.
Thank you for joining us on this nostalgia trip. Skywind is being made by people like you, artists and writers, developers and tinkerers of all types who possess a love for Morrowind. As always, we continue to welcome volunteers of all experience levels. So if you'd like to help bring the project to life, visit TESRSkywind.com/volunteer. Happy birthday, Morrowind.